Kristen, do you see Carl? Is he here?
Yeah.
Carl
Okay.
was outside, I saw him, yeah.
Does he know he's first?
First or second, I told him.
We're doing half the Eagles first.
Perfect. Welcome, everyone. This is the April 27th, 2023 public hearing for the Planning Board of the Town of Southampton. I'd like to do roll call. Gloria, please.
Chair LaFaro.
Present.
Vice Chair Finnerty is absent. The Secretary is here. Board Member Catalinato.
Present.
Board Member Mutu.
Present.
Board Member Neely.
Present.
Board Member Fulham is absent. Do we have a quorum?
Thank you. Can you please join in for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Just a note for safety that if there is an emergency, exit either of the doors in this room, go down the stairs and out the front door. That is the route. So I have a sign-in sheet for those people who wish to speak on the applications. I'll call those people first, and then if someone else wants to speak, I'll get to them, okay? So when you come to the podium to speak, just say your name. We've got it here, so you don't have to fill in anything. We're going to go out of order, and we're going to go with Huffnagel first, Canal, Southampton Sabana Cottage #2, and then the battery storage last. So we are going with Huffnagel, and we have notice.
We do,
Counsel?
Madam Chair.
Okay. And let us read it into the record.
Please take notice that in accordance with local law number 417 of 2022, a public hearing will be held by the Southampton Town Planning Board on Thursday, April 27th, 2023 at 6 p.m. at Town Hall, 116 Hampton Road, Southampton, and via video conferencing to consider the pre-application entitled Alec Huffnagel. The application proposes a two-lot subdivision of 2.2-acre property situated in the CR80 zoning district, Aquifer Overlay District, and Ag Overlay District at 51 Little Noyak Path, Watermill, Suffolk County Tax Map number 900-66-1-6.5.
Okay, Mr. Benincasa, give us your name for the record.
Carl Benacasa for the applicant, 860 Montauk Highway, Watermill, New York. Always good to see you, Madam Chair, members of the board. As noted, this is an application for a minor two-lot subdivision located at 51 Little Noyak Path, which is just at the convergence of Little Noyak Path and Noyak Path in the hamlet of Noyak. It is a 2.23-acre parcel located in a CR80 zoning district. The proposed lots have an average size of 48,680 square feet. Obviously, that's undersized for the zoning district. In order to achieve this, we will need a variance for lot size, which is certainly a precondition. With respect to our prospects for that variance, while not necessarily a concern for this board, I would note the history of this parcel lends some optimism towards the thought with respect to achieving a variance. One, this lot was originally two parcels. Under the 1981 tax map,
Can I ask them to speak into the microphone more? I'm having trouble hearing.
That's a mic for the television, but maybe we can
I'll try to
get it
speak
right.
louder.
Yeah, just speak into it.
So in 1981, this was actually two separate lots, as Anthony just showed on the old tax map. Subsequent to that, they did merge into one, and then with that third lot that's directly adjoining the two, there was a lot line modification. And you can see the red line is the current configuration of the lot. You can see how it changed from that 81 tax map. Now, the lots in the area, of the 8 lots that border this property, 6 are undersized. 3 of them are smaller in size than the proposed lots with respect to this plan. As I noted again, the lots are just under 49,000 square feet as proposed. Adjacent lots, there is a 41,000 square foot lot, a 42,000 square foot lot, and a 44,000 square foot lot. So in light of that, we believe that it is in character with the neighborhood, which did develop previous to the 1983 upzoning as a CR 40 area. Again, we will need a variance, that's not a question, nor is it a consideration for this board, as the standards for a variance will be considered by the zoning board, which is our next stop. But in consultation with your planning department and town officials, they wanted us to come to this pre-submission first, and then we'll head to the zoning board.
I'm assuming that's farm fields?
It is farm fields, yep, just off of Scuttle Hole. Those are the farm fields north of Scuttle Hole.
Okay.
So do you have a cluster plan of some kind?
It's just 2 lots, so, no, they're fully, again, I don't know how you'd call it, but they're sub-yield, because we'll need variances for lot size.
What did you say the sizes of the lots were?
Their average size is 48,000, and it's CR 80 zoning, so we need some relief,
So quite a bit of relief.
quite a
yeah.
bit of relief, yes.
Will the house that's existing stay, or is the idea to tear that down too and build 2 larger houses?
No, the house to the north will stay, and you really cannot build a large house. Part of the relief that we'll ask for the zoning board would be dimensional relief with respect to a proposed building envelope. But given the zoning restrictions and the undersized nature of the lot, assuming we get the variance, the home size will certainly be limited.
And you're in the Aquifer Protection Overlay District, so
Yep.
there are
And the
clearing
ag.
restrictions.
Yeah.
Yes,
And the Ag Overlay District.
that's
Clearing
correct.
would be what, about 50%? Or would be more?
On a
for-
48,000 square foot lot, I think it's about 50%.
Yeah, because 40 would be,
That's right.
40,000 would be 50%.
And
I've never been able to commit them to memory, the percentages,
Ah.
but yes, that sounds right.
You subdivide them according to the original tax map?
What was that?
That, is this being subdivided according, the same subdivision would be the way
I
the
don't
original
think
tax
it's
map?
exactly,
little-
because there had been
requirements are
some lot
different.
line adjustments.
It's somewhat
that Steve's
different, but
explaining,
the resulting lots will be very similar in size to as they were under the original tax map. Remember, they merged, and then there was a lot line modification with a neighboring parcel. So the lots have changed size. The lots have changed shape over time. So it wouldn't be exactly the same as on the 81 tax map, but it'd be very similar.
So the 1981 tax map, it was 2 lots.
That's correct.
And then,
Single and separate, 2 lots.
okay, and then when did the lot lines change?
I believe the lot lines changed in 87, but I can confirm that information for you.
Is that when the lots were merged?
That's when they merged, and then there was a lot line modification in 2004.
Ah, 2004.
So I'm sorry, I was confused by the question, about what you were asking. The merger, I believe, was in 87, and the modification was in 04.
Okay.
And was that, why were they merged?
Was it intentional, or was it by operation of law?
Yes.
That, I don't have the answer to that.
Okay.
My clients did not own it at the time. We just know that it merged.
Okay.
Just if I, for the board and the applicant, that lot line change was never really approved, correct?
The 04 lot line
Yeah.
change?
Or what?
Well, it's in the chain of title.
But was there a
Agreements.
planning board, the reason why I'm asking is.
Oh, was there planning board approval for the
Approval of the
lot line? Not
change.
that I'm aware of.
So my point is that when they get to the health department stage, they could raise this as an issue,
They could.
and then we're getting a third part of the application. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, thank you, good point. Okay, so let's hear from the public. We have some people who have signed in to speak. Rosemary and Robert Parroquia. Did I say that right? Parroquia, okay, please. Just state your name.
Rosemary Parroquia, And my husband and I live at 622 Noyak Path, and which is around the corner from this corner lot.
Right?
And also my neighbor, Sydney Talisman, who could not be here, lives
So
at...
hang on for just a second.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Excuse-
the microphone is just
Excuse
for
me,
the
can I
audio,
have just some quiet? Thanks.
So you have to project.
So my husband and I live at 622 Noyak Path, and around the corner, or on the same road where the corner lot is that we're talking about. And my neighbor, Sydney Talisman, who is a very elderly gentleman, couldn't be here tonight, but he has lived here since next to me on 614 Noyak Path. And he knows much more about the history of these mergers since the 1970s. And I guess our question really has to do with the ability to build a house, or is the acreage what's allowable by the board, or what are the guidelines? Not that I really understand, but I thought it was 2-acre zoning. But those are the issues that just come up as concerned neighbors, and I'm speaking for him as well as
Right.
myself.
So you
Because-
heard the applicant say that these are undersized, it's CR 80, 2 acre.
Yeah,
And these lots, if they're subdivided, would be an acre.
yeah,
So they have to go to the zoning board for relief.
okay,
So that's where also statements and issues and positions can be presented.
yeah.
So, yeah.
So obviously, the decisions are above us, but, the uniqueness of the area with the farmland and the vistas is, as important to us as what's, allowable in terms of agriculture and clearing. And so the idea that the sign saying subdivision just concerned us.
Exactly.
Just
Good.
wanted to let
Thank
you
you for coming.
Thank you.
Helena
Does your husband
Rokos?
want to speak? Oh.
Helena?
Oh.
No, I think she spoke for them.
Hi, how are you? So we just bought next one property. So the numbers is, I think, 596. Just you can hear me. So last year we bought the property which is next, the one which we are talking. So we are shocked because we paid a lot of money, and we thought this 2 acres will have nice privacy, and now we find out it's planned to subdivide this. So
You're the house northeast?
Her property's right here, the one that we were just talking
yes,
about.
just next. So my address is Noyak Path, not Little
Right.
Noyak.
This
Yes.
one right here.
And what number is that?
596.
596.
Because Mr. Talisman has number, I think, 600 something. Yes. 614. Yes.
And
So
it
Okay.
looks like it's vacant land that you
an acre.
purchased? Is there a
So
house?
just is property right now.
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
We bought last year, I think, in February, something like this. Yes. So we didn't know.
And it's 2
this will
acres.
be-
Your lot is 2 acres?
Yes.
One
No,
acre.
1 acre.
One acre.
1 acre. Yes. And then it's corner, So we thought it's nice place.
Well, the views from there are fabulous.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's all that I have speaking. Does anybody else wish to speak who has not signed in? Carl, do you want to say some words?
Anybody on Zoom?
No, just in summation, a lot of the neighbors' concerns are better addressed by the zoning board as they have to
Yeah.
do with lot size, and certainly that's not the province of this board. And at that zoning board hearing, you'll have another opportunity to speak, so I just wanted to make that clear. But other than that, the lots proposed are conforming in all ways except, obviously, lot size, and we know that the road that lies ahead, and we'll wait for the report from staff.
Okay.
Check Zoom.
Is anyone on Zoom? Kim?
on Zoom.
No one is on Zoom. Is this pre-submission?
Yes.
It doesn't say.
It is pre-submission.
It is pre-submission.
So then that's a 30-day.
Oh, it's a
It's
pre-app, I'm
pre-app.
sorry.
It's a pre-app.
Pre-app,
That's,
pre-app,
it
sorry.
doesn't indicate it.
Sorry.
I did the same thing.
I always confuse those two.
I do too.
Okay, so I'm going to do a 30-day written comment period on this. Can I have a vote?
Motion?
Motion by Craig, second by Gloria, and all in favor.
Aye.
Opposed, 5 in favor. 5 in favor, 2 absent. I'm sorry, did you want to speak? What? Come on up.
Will we have another opportunity to address this?
Yes.
At the zoning,
At the
the zoning board of appeals.
I just want to make one statement.
You have to come to the podium. Are you Robert?
I'm Robert.
You are Robert
Parochian.
Parocchia, yes.
The attorney made a statement that a lot of the properties were less than an acre. That's not what we think. The majority of the properties are 2 acres plus, and they're not less than an acre.
Okay.
I just want to make that.
Want to clarify
fact.
that, okay,
Thank you.
He said they were undersized.
yeah.
I did not say they were less than an acre, I said they were undersized, and that is true. The majority of the properties in the surrounding area are undersized.
Okay, so we've taken a vote on the 30-day written comment period and voted on, so thank you very much. So you can send in comments to us if you wish.
Carl, can you just explain to them, the zoning board of appeals, they'll have another hearing and a notice, and they'll be told,
They'll have another hearing before a different board.
well,
that-
not here.
Unnoticed,
like-
oh, okay. And another hearing before this board.
I was about to explain, do the same thing.
Always good to see you all. Thank you.
Good, thank you. So you understand that, the zoning board of appeals, which is another board that issues variances when something is undersized or don't have setbacks. So you can go to that hearing and state your position.
Will we be alerted to that?
Yeah, he's gonna explain that to you, what you can expect.
He'll tell you privately.
But yes.
Yeah.
Same way you worded this one.
Okay, thank you. We're moving on to Canal
No,
Battery.
Sabana.
What?
Sabana Cottages.
Sabana.
Cottage.
Oh, sorry, Sabana Cottage. That's number 2. And we have sufficient notice, council?
We do, Madam Chair.
Okay, Gloria?
Please take notice that in accordance with the local law 417 of 2022, a public hearing will be held by the Southampton Town Planning Board on Thursday, April 27th, 2023, at 6 p.m. at Town Hall. 116 Hampton Road, Southampton, and via video conferencing, to consider the site plan special exception application entitled Sabana Cottage. The site plan special exception application proposes to demolish an existing single-family house and construct a 2-story, 4,130 square foot building for special trade contractor use with associated parking on a 19,800 square foot parcel located within the HB zoning district, the WQI high priority area, and a New York State archaeological sensitive area at 28 Shrubland Road, Tuckahoe, Suffolk Tax Map number 900-177-1-29.
Okay,
Good evening, Joe Lombardi from the Rayner Group, 860 Montauk Highway in Watermill. Our office represents Sagabana Cottage LLC, which is proposing a commercial redevelopment of a 19,800 square foot parcel located at 28 Shrubland Road. It's approximately 438 feet east of the intersection with County Road 39. The parcel's improved with a 1-story dwelling, a detached garage, a sanitary system, driveway, parking area. All of these existing structures will be removed in order to construct the 4,130 square foot building that will be for general and special trade contractor use. A total of 15 parking spaces are required, and 15 parking spaces are provided, including 3 in the building. A cross-access easement is proposed to the parcel to the south. Planting areas are provided along all 4 sides of the building. to allow for on-site landscaping and visual screening of the proposed building and parking and circulation areas. During its review of the project, the Architectural Review Board recommended a hedge along the frontage on Shrubland Road. We've revised our landscaping plan to show that. Provisions have been made to handle stormwater runoff from the parking areas, walks, landscape areas, and the building roof. There's an existing 12-inch water main that runs along the south side of Shrubland Road, so the site will be served by public water. The method of wastewater disposal will be reviewed by Suffolk County Department of Health Services. An IA system is proposed. Approval of the sanitary system water supply will be required before a building permit can be obtained. The site is located within an archaeologically sensitive area. Tracker Archaeology was retained by the project sponsor to conduct a Phase 1 archaeological investigation. No artifacts or features were encountered. The report recommends no further archaeological work on the property.
Joe, what is the building that's there now that will be demolished?
It's a one-story cottage, a residential structure.
Residential?
Mhm.
Okay. And is this the elevations?
Yes, for the proposed building.
Any other questions?
Joe, do you know how much width there is between the edge of the pavement and the property line? As far as putting a hedge in, how close are you going to be to the road?
Well, we
It's
won't be
generally
putting a
around
hedge in,
8
the-
feet
we
or
won't be,
something.
we won't be putting a hedge in the right-of-way.
Right.
So the hedge will be on the property.
Some roads, the right-of-way is closer than other roads.
It looks like the edge of pavement is about 15 feet off of the property line.
Okay, so there's plenty of room to put the hedging in and still have good line of sight exiting the driveway.
Yeah, the hedge will be back in here. So
Okay.
that's probably closer to 20 feet off of the edge of pavement.
Thank you.
Okay, so no one has signed in for this. Is there anyone who wants to speak to this application? Is there anyone on Zoom, Ken?
No,
Okay. Is this just a pre-submission or pre?
This is a
Pre-app.
formal site plan.
So it's a 10-day written comment
You
period?
could do 10 days, yeah, in this case.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll close the hearing with a 10-day written comment period. Motion by George, second by
Second.
Gloria, and all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, 5 in favor, 2 absent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Okay, so our third and last is the Canal Southampton Battery Storage. And we have notice, sufficient
We
notice?
do, Madam Chair.
Great. George?
Please take notice that in accordance with local law number 417 of 2022, a public hearing will be held by the Southampton Town Planning Board on Thursday, April 27th, 2023, at 6 p.m. at Town Hall, 116 Hampton Road, Southampton, and via video conferencing, to consider the site plan special exception application entitled Canal Southampton Battery Storage. The site plan special exception application proposes the construction of a battery energy storage unit system greater than 600 kVA
Thank you.
and containing 30 battery enclosures, each with 24 battery modules, on a 4.9 acre property situated in R60 zoning district and New York State archaeological sensitive area, located at 24 North Road and 17 Larboard Road, Hampton Bays, Suffolk County Tax Map 900-208-1-2 and 4.1.
Okay, please give us your name and an overview of the application, please.
Surely. My name is Keith Archer. I'm a partner at Harris Bloom and Archer, 445 Broad Hollow Road in Melville, and we represent the applicant in this proceeding. May I proceed with a description? Great, thank you. By the way, also, with me is another attorney from my office, Andrew Filipazzi of our firm, who worked with me on this application. The property in question, I think most of you are aware, because this is not the first time that we're before the planning board with respect to this property. But it's a 4.9 acre parcel of land on North Road, which is located approximately 90 feet south of eastbound Sunrise Highway, between the exit and the entrance ramps of Sunrise Highway at exit 66. The property is mostly undeveloped, with the exception of one existing single-family home and 4 auxiliary cottages, which will be demolished as part of this project. The property abuts a county DPW facility on its western end, and the property is owned R60 residential. Now, the R60 residential zoning regulations permit a battery storage facility in excess of 600 kilowatt hours by planning board special exception upon a showing that the application complies with section 162.21, which are the specific requirements, as well as the special exception general requirements of section 330 or 122 of the town code. And the applicant is also requesting site plan approval pursuant to section 330, 183 of the town code. So I should mention that the special exception requirements for this type of battery energy storage system are based upon a model code that was developed and adopted by the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, which have been incorporated into the codes, the town codes, of many of the towns on Long Island: Hempstead, Riverhead, Brookhaven, and Islip. Huntington has it incorporated in a little different format. The regulations impose extensive design and safety requirements for a BESS facility. So joining me tonight, we brought a group, I apologize, but we thought that there would be different questions asked, so we brought our consultants with us. But joining me tonight to respond to questions and provide additional information that may be needed is Gus Aditi and John O'Hara and Joe Stanek, who are principals of the applicant, Kevin Maher and Elizabeth Weatherby. I think Elizabeth is on by Zoom, from AKRF, the applicant's environmental consultant, are here. They prepared the expanded environmental assessment. Michael Clark, a professional engineer with Mott McDonald, the applicant's engineering firm, prepared the plans that were submitted. And Nick Petrakis and Paul Rogers from Energy Safety Response Group, the applicant's energy storage and fire safety consultant. So before I proceed, and by the way, my presentation is not that long, but before proceeding further, I should mention that the applicant was before this board on February 10th, 2022 for a pre-submission hearing of this application, at which time a full description of the project was presented. The applicants and his consultants also appeared before the board on September 8th, 2022 for a secret hearing, where the applicant responded to the board's questions regarding the project. That hearing was adjourned and continued to allow the applicant to provide written responses to questions that was presented by the board. The additional responses were submitted and reviewed by the town planning department. The applicant returned on October 27th, 2022 to continue the hearing, at which time the board adopted negative declaration pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act. So the applicant's plans have been reviewed and deemed compliant by the planning department, as well as by the town engineer. There was back and forth with the town engineer, some comments, the plans were revised, and as far as we know, they're now acceptable to the town. Now, since our first presentation some 14 months ago, the applicant and its environmental engineering team, let me get rid of this, have provided additional information to the planning and building departments, including a very comprehensive environmental assessment, which reviewed all of the special exception and site plan requirements and demonstrated that the project will comply with the applicable site plan requirements and special permit requirements. So this public hearing is really the culmination of that lengthy process and detailed process for the applicant's proposed battery storage facility. Now, as this board is no doubt aware from our prior submissions and its own experience, BEST facilities were conceived to integrate clean, renewable energy alternatives, particularly wind and solar, into New York's transmission grid. Doing so reduces the carbon footprint by displacing aging fossil fuel generating facilities, resulting in a net improvement in air quality and reduction in the need for additional generating facilities, which is the major goal. New York State has adopted a Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which has an energy storage target goal of at least 600 megawatts by 2030. In furtherance of the state's goal, once this facility is operational, the batteries will be recharged at night or during times where solar and wind power are at peak production, and will be available to augment the supply of electricity to the local transmission system during hours of peak demand. As noted in the applicant's expanded environmental assessment, the BEST facility will be capable of powering approximately 65,000 homes for approximately 2 hours. The property is in an excellent location for a BEST facility due to its proximity to the LIPA substation, which is about 1,000 feet, 1,100 feet to the east, and having minimal adjacent properties with Sunrise Highway eastbound directly to the north. The site plan submitted with the application shows 30 battery enclosures with battery modules within each of the enclosures, as well as support equipment that is utilized along with a cable which will connect to the LIPA substation about 1,100 feet to the east, which will be not trenched, but it'll be directionally drilled. The tallest piece of equipment will be 20 feet, and I think that's one singular piece, and it'll be screened, with most of the equipment being approximately 8 to 10 feet. There is existing landscaping around the site. Landscaping will be supplemented, particularly in the front yard. The site will be secured by a 4-foot-high chain link fence with the new landscaping installed on the periphery. So we pointed out a while ago, and I think most are aware, that the site's vegetation has been subject to pine beetle infestation, which we have been advised by the town and our environmental professionals to leave alone, anticipating significant regrowth. And so we've done that, except obviously for the supplemental landscaping that's proposed. Access to the site will be by a singular curb cut on North Road. No parking is shown, since the facility will be operated remotely with only an occasional maintenance vehicle entering the site. As required by the special exception conditions and safeguards set forth in section 16221 of the town code governing battery storage facilities, the applicant has submitted a fire safety compliance plan which outlines how the project complies with the applicable fire codes and requirements. The applicant has also submitted an emergency response plan which provides information to any facility personnel and emergency agencies that may be required in the event of an unanticipated emergency at or near the facility. A copy of this plan will also be given to the local fire department and to the local town fire officials. The additional special exception documents submitted include a noise analysis, evidencing the facility's compliance with the town's noise ordinance, as well as a decommissioning plan. There's a commissioning plan, there's a decommissioning plan. The decommissioning plan requires the owner of the facility to maintain a fund with the town that would secure removal of the battery storage facility at the end of its life. So as indicated in the public notice, the property is located in the New York State archaeologically sensitive area. AKRF, the applicant's environmental consultant, has conducted a phase 1 archaeological investigation and submitted its report to the town prior to this meeting. The overall conclusion of that report was that no potentially significant artifacts were observed or collected, and no archaeological features were observed. Given the absence of archaeological resources, it was concluded that development of the property is unlikely to affect archaeological resources. So, in considering this application, the applicant is not seeking relief from any of the zoning or special exception regulations set forth in the town code applicable to a best facility. To the contrary, the applicant has shown its compliance with all town requirements, and that the site for the best facility is suitable and is compatible with the town's comprehensive plan, as evidenced by the secret negative declaration adopted by the board on October 27, 2022. So that concludes my presentation. We have our consultants available to respond to any questions that board members may have, or that the board may ask us to respond to that may be presented by any members of the public.
Can we have your fire safety expert
Sure.
come and address the public and the board? Because I'm sure there are questions about that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Members of the board, good evening, and members of Southampton. Appreciate you guys having us tonight. My name is Nick Petrakis. I am a registered design professional in the state of New York. Sorry, of course. Don't worry. Okay. I'll try to project my voice. I'm a smaller guy.
And address us, please. Address the board.
Members of the board, I appreciate you taking the time hosting us tonight. My name is Nick Petrakis. I am a senior consultant with Energy Safety Response Group. We specialize in battery energy storage systems and energy storage safety. We are made of members of past fire department personnel, first responders, and engineers such as myself. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have about energy storage systems, even specifically lithium-ion-based energy stationary storage systems, as I believe that is something that is out of our expertise and we can help you out with tonight.
It is out of your expertise?
It is our expertise.
Okay, so just to tell us a bit about lithium batteries, the safety of them, the danger of them, et cetera. I'm sure the public wants to hear that.
Okay, fantastic. So prior to me joining ESRG, I was the Assistant Deputy Director in the New York City Fire Department's Sustainability Unit. And what I did at the New York City Fire Department is I reviewed lithium-ion energy storage systems for installations within a very densely populated urban environment such as New York City. This started and fell on my plate back in 2014, where I was joined with our principal founder, Paul Rogers, who's in the room. We were trying to develop requirements for energy storage systems in New York City. Since then, there's been a tremendous amount of lessons learned and development in the technology itself, especially in regards to safety. I think lithium-ion batteries, unfortunately, do get a sort of a bad name. If anybody has seen anything that's happened in the news lately regarding e-bikes and e-mobility, it is a very serious issue that's unfortunately plaguing New York City at the moment. The technology itself is not something that's very new. I think everybody has a lithium-ion battery in their pocket right now, from their cell phones, from laptops, and electric vehicles and such. Stationary installations, stationary lithium-ion battery energy storage systems, that similarity ends right there at that cell level. There is a tremendous amount of research, a tremendous amount of safety requirements that are implemented to be able to even allow any of these systems to be installed in any sort of stationary system and stationary application. I think we talk about listings. One of the big important requirements for these systems is for them to be listed by a nationally recognized testing lab. And basically what a listing does is an independent third-party company will take a look at the technology and scrutinize it for safety. And ultimately, once it meets a certain level of safety standards, they will put that seal from that agency. We've seen it on laptops. We've seen it on almost every piece of technology. That little UL stamp basically means that it's been validated for safety. So there's a tremendous amount of history as far as the codes go. New York State itself with the 2020 Uniform Fire Prevention Code. I really have to hand it to New York State. When they were developing and adopting this model code, there was developments in the International Fire Code at the point in 2021. They weren't even released yet. They're sort of the most recent and the most robust and up-to-date requirements for energy storage systems. New York State sort of went above and beyond in 2020 when they adopted a majority of those provisions from the 2021 International Fire Code. So I do believe that New York State has probably some of the most restrictive and robust requirements for energy storage systems.
How do you interface with the local fire departments?
That's an excellent question. ESRG, we provide training services to the Suffolk County Fire Association, to the training facility. Actually, we did recently a training to Suffolk County, to the fire authorities from Amagassett, and I believe there were members from the local responding companies there. We like to do training as more of a lessons learned, and also this is a very unique technology, so making sure that the first responders are adequately trained and a fully understanding of this technology is something that we really hold near and dear to our hearts. So we do train in Suffolk County, we do trainings throughout the country. We also have our own test facility where we develop best practices and things like that.
How do you suppress a lithium battery fire?
So that's a great question as well. There's a lot of information out there. Some people would say use a tremendous amount of water. Other people would say don't do anything at all. Ultimately, it really depends on the technology. For stationary systems, these larger stationary systems, they're required to go through something called the UL 9540A test method, which is a destructive fire test, where an individual cell is forced into a failure, a thermal runaway. A tremendous amount of data is obtained from that test. Those cells are put together to create a module. The same exact test is rerun, and then same with the unit level when you have a larger system. And what this testing does is it validates a lot of the safety requirements. It shows that these technologies are resistant to propagating thermal runaway, but it also provides insight onto some of the protection techniques and also for suppression. Majority of the stationary installations will actually maintain that thermal runaway and isolate it to the initiating unit, and it will not become a much larger event that would require really aggressive firefighting tactics, such as utilizing water. When we train fire departments, we holistically take the approach of a very defensive, nature of firefighting. We do not want first responders going into facilities, opening up cabinets, actively putting water into that cabinet itself. These technologies are designed to sort of, I call it safely consume itself, which is sort of a very unique approach for a lot of technologies. But ultimately, these systems are sort of tested to show that they can keep that failure isolated to within the unit.
So they're in a protective container, right, with their own water system to extinguish the fire. That does it. I know I'm no expert in the field, but wouldn't that generate steam, and steam generate pressure and
Right.
possibly?
So water is also a double-edged sword. So the technologies themselves typically don't utilize an internal water-based system. Some technologies have an alternative agent, as such like a clean agent or some sort of other agent that will interfere with the combustion process. For the most part, these technologies will not utilize any sort of incorporated suppression systems because that thermal runaway event is really isolated to that individual module. It's not going to propagate, it's not going to become a much bigger event that would warrant or necessitate water being introduced internally. Because you're absolutely right. Water, if it's put into a system that isn't affected, it could create more problems than intended. And oftentimes, our guidance to the first responders, and when they're taking a defensive approach, is only to utilize water in a defensive manner if it's needed to cool adjacent exposures or manage any sort of incident.
Can I ask a question? And if you do use water in one of those instances, what is there, if there is a process for, because obviously that water is going to run down and go into the ground, the bays, wherever. So what are the mechanisms by which you clean that water before it disperses elsewhere?
Yeah, that's a great question. In our testing lab, we're also doing a tremendous amount of data information gathering, as there's also a number of different agencies throughout the country that are taking that information. When we recommend a defensive approach action, it's ultimately not utilizing water to really get into that cabinet and interface with those battery technologies. So water, when it's used in defensive sort of approaches, it's more along the lines of sprayed on the exterior of adjacent systems. It's not directly going into that technology itself and mixing in with the battery technology. So that water runoff, depending on how that water is utilized, could be more alluded to something that's similar to rainwater runoff, if it's not aggressively introduced into the battery cabinet itself. We are still collecting a lot of data. That statement is really ultimately dependent on how much water is being utilized and how aggressive that approach is. But for the most part, with our recommendations to the fire service, taking a defensive approach to it, that water runoff is not going to contain anything exotic that we see that need any sort of special containment or anything like that.
Have you been able to speak with the fire department here to see whether or not, because obviously everybody plans for the worst case scenario, they have the capacity in terms of water pressure, et cetera, and ability to put out in case there was something?
Yeah, so not for this specific site, but we do a lot of training with the Suffolk County Fire Association, and it doesn't require any sort of unique technologies or any sort of unique resources from the fire department to respond to any one of these systems. I think with the water supply that's available from the municipal supply in the area, and also the resources that the fire department already has at hand, they're more than adequate to deal with any sort of incident. With that caveat that we still always make this recommendation that these systems still develop an emergency response procedure and emergency management plans, which Rhineland has provided. It's good to do site familiarization and training with the fire department so they're aware of this system and they understand that it is in their responding agency and their jurisdiction.
So you would come in and work with the Hampton Bays Fire Department?
I'm sorry?
You would come in and work with the Hampton Bays Fire Department or other
And,
assistant
and
departments?
adjacent fire
Assistant,
departments
right.
too, because-
Absolutely, that is our intent. We're constantly training with the Suffolk County Fire Departments, and I think that is something that we do think is very critical with constant interface with the departments and constant training, so they're aware of the hazards associated.
You
two-
mentioned
I'm
that
sorry.
the containment would keep the batteries that were blowing up intact. What is that made of, that it wouldn't melt or what?
That's a great question.
Can I piggyback a question of that, which was one of my
Absolutely.
questions? I'm sorry to, but so, yes, I think the approach we're hearing is that you let it burn as best you can. And by the defensive approach of not introducing water, you're not having contaminants from the fire. But what are the byproducts of combustion that's going up into the air that's unique to lithium fires?
Excellent. So for the first part of the question, these energy storage technologies are incorporated with layers of safety. It's either passive barriers to isolate that thermal runaway, cascading prevention. It's also electrical protections, right? These systems have a 24/7 monitoring system that's basically constantly collecting the pulse of this system, seeing how the technology is operating, seeing if there's anything that's operating out of bounds or out of normal. This network's operations and this battery management system is going to actively protect it. If it sees that things are going where it's not supposed to be going and they're operating out of the normal, it does automatic protections as far as isolations and things like that to protect the system. So we have our first layer, which is passive protection. We have our electrical protections. And then we also have a system level approach. If there are an amount of flammable off-gassings that were to develop within that enclosure, there's a number of active fire protection systems that are there to mitigate that hazard. So these energy storage systems are really heavily dependent on a multiple layer safety approach, which are implemented in a lot of the safety standards and requirements. But I do want to talk about the off-gassing as well, which is something that's also being discussed heavily in the industry. It's really dependent also on the individual manufacturer. I mentioned that 9540A test method, which is a destructive test method. Part of that test method is actually to take a lot of that data, that off-gassing data, that's during the thermal runaway event, and it gives guidance as to how to design those protection systems. From what we've seen for the majority of it in the industry is that there's nothing exotic that is coming out of these when they are failing, off-gassing. It can often be alluded to something that's very similar to your regular structure fire, residential compartment fire. That being said, with a lot of more modern furnishings and plastics and foams, it's not fantastic. So we do recommend to first responders that they always don full protective PPE, SCBA, but for the most part, the first responders, that if they were responding to a larger event, they would be adequately protected. The site is in a very is in a good location that is pretty remote from anything that would be considered a sensitive exposure. So there is a number of things working in that favor.
So, worst case scenario, you have one module, one container, which, has to, burn itself to destruction, for example. How long do you think that fire would go over in order to burn itself out?
So it depends on the manufacturer. It also depends on how that failure, how severe that failure is. There's that 9548 test data that we mentioned, also includes a timeline of events. So depending on how that cell is structured, depending on how that module is structured, it'll give you a good insight as to how long this duration of event is expected to be. Like I mentioned before, a majority of these applications and a majority of these technologies are designed to isolate that. So if there is a thermal runaway, or even a thermal runaway that's cascaded to maybe a number of adjacent cells, from the exterior of the system, it would show that there'd be no external visible flaming or anything like that. That failure has been contained to within that unit. There's sort of no exacerbated failure that would propagate to any of those adjacent systems. So even that duration of event, and that is isolated within the module, depending on how long it is, it's really dependent on those 9548 tests and what they show. The approach for most of these systems is to contain it. So it wouldn't show any sort of exterior.
Okay, I understand that, but the question I'm really asking is, okay, so real-world examples, there must have been have there been any fires, real-world fires in any of your systems anywhere in the world?
Absolutely.
So how long from the start of the fire, let's call it that, to it being fully put out or fully extinguished? And the reason I said twofold. One is all our fire departments out here are volunteer. People don't have full-time jobs they get paid for. So if this is going to go for, if the fire department has to keep eyes on us and keep defensive, firefighting for 6 hours, 2 days, 6 days, I'm not sure what the length of that time is. It's a hardship on fire districts. And secondly, again, if you want to equate this to a house burning, which because a fire department can come in and put water on that and put it down in an hour or half an hour or 2 hours, versus something that's burning for, again, 6 hours, 6 days, I'm not sure what that duration is. There's a difference in what you're getting spewed out in the atmosphere from, a house fire that goes out in 2 hours versus something that goes out in a much longer period of time.
Yeah, so for me to give you a good estimate baseline on the duration of event is really going to be in flux depending on how that manufacturer designs their system. But that being said, this is something that we deal with not just in Long Island, but throughout the country, volunteer departments and the resources that they have available to them. And we truly feel for them, especially with staffing issues. But that being said, we also believe that it doesn't require a tremendous amount of resources. In my previous experience in New York City, we implemented something called the Certificate of Fitness, who is ultimately a subject matter expert. They're familiar with the site, they're familiar with the technology, they're also sort of the phone a friend to that fire department, to that incident commander. So these sites are equipped with a BMS notification center where they could pick up that phone and they could call and see what's going on in the interior of the system and even call for some help from the subject matter expert. That is the key to allowing the fire department to be alleviated from a scene and not waste any more resources there than absolutely needed. Because oftentimes that failure might not be necessarily visible and they'll have no idea what's going on. If has it finished, are we going to be called back to the site? Having the information and having that subject matter expert at hand gives them the ability to sort of hand off that system to somebody that's ultimately familiar and is taking a look at the internals and seeing how that system is behaving. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is to ultimately alleviate a lot of those concerns with resources from the fire department, having that implementation of a 24/7 monitored facility where they can reach out and they can see what's going on in that system is going to be able to give them a little bit more confidence with what's going on in that system.
So do we not know the specific units that are going to be used at this facility?
No, we do. We do have information on that. I like to speak in general terms for lithium-ion technologies because for the majority of them, a lot of these safety measures are all very applicable So, we're not seeking any sort of special exemption for this project.
Right.
And, they're going to be in compliance with all of the stringent requirements in the New York State Code.
So our planning board, I mean, we're used to dealing in very specific information. So when Board Member Mutu asks, specifically how long would this unit burn for, and we don't have a definite answer, that makes us a little uncomfortable. I mean, ultimately, our board is responsible for an awful lot of people in the community. I would feel very uncomfortable saying, I don't know.
Right.
So we need to know.
So I do believe that 9548 test data should be able to be made available to the board for review, but that's ultimately.
Well, I'm also curious too, if there has been a fire at a facility where there is at a BESS facility in Texas or wherever, how long what was the duration of the event?
I could just speak to generalities. I mean, I'm sure.
I'm looking for specificity, not
specifics.
just generalities.
Yeah, understood. Unfortunately, I have to go back to some of the events that did actually happen and just some of the public knowledge. It goes all the way from the events that happened in Arizona in 2018, in Peoria, Arizona, to some of the incidents that happened in California, right, at the Moss Landing incident. I can't speak too much on Moss Landing because we are involved in the investigation for that, but there is a tremendous amount of data that's available, just public data from news reports. That event was an extended duration event, but that event also was a testament to a system that failed safely, a system that safely consumed itself without.
How long was the event?
The fire event, it depends on, that could have been exacerbated due to maybe some of the more aggressive firefighting tactics. Some of these systems are designed to burn.
No, excuse us.
No.
The
conversation.
The conversation has to be this way till we give you a call.
So that event was an extended duration event. It was almost an entire day. It wasn't burning for an entire day. The fire department was at the scene. Those systems that were there are designed to consume themselves in about 4 to 6 hours, which is a pretty lengthy amount of time. I do want to make also.
Okay, but that's an answer we're looking for, right? Because I'm a volunteer firefighter, so I know even when we go to a house fire, we're there for 4 to 6 hours for a decent house fire anyway. So I'm looking for something of comparative duration, so we have an idea of what we're looking for. I think somebody wants to, I don't know if he's a.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, I appreciate that, but I also wanted to make the distinction that that's also a different technology.
Okay.
So I don't want to mislead you with a number that might not be necessarily reflective of the technology that
I
we're
understand
using
it.
here.
We're looking for real world examples
Yeah.
to give an idea of
Right.
what
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we have a lot of people in the audience. I just want to ask you one quick question before we get to the questions
Absolutely.
that maybe you can address as well. How many of these systems are up and operating of your systems and in New York State?
I don't have the number specifically for these systems. I think maybe somebody else from the team might be able to give you that number of how many systems they have operational.
You actually have operating systems right now.
We
That's my
we're-
question.
So we're the safety consultants. This is more for Ryland. Right?
You know that there's a system operational now in Flanders. Gus Aditi probably has more information on that.
My name is Gus Hadidi. I'm a principal with Rhineland Energy.
Yeah,
Yes.
Wayne, speak up.
Okay.
Give me your
So
name,
there's-
Gus.
My name is Gus Hadidi, Rhineland Energy. There are about 100 megawatts of operational capacity in New York today, and 1,000 megawatts that is going to come into operations this year.
How many systems is that? How many units?
It really depends, units can, it
Everything
can range
depends, right?
from 5 megawatts to 50 megawatts to 100
No,
megawatts.
but how many systems? How many
How many
units?
sites?
How many sites?
Collectively on Long Island right now, for example, there are 3 sites that are operational.
And where are they?
There's one in East Hampton, there's one in Montauk, and then there's another one which I think is smaller site in Hempstead, New York.
And these are your systems?
Those are not my systems.
Are they the same size as this system?
No, they're smaller systems. Our site here is 100 megawatts. The operational ones are 5 megawatts, except their duration is longer. So the duration for the one in East Montauk is 20 megawatt hours. Our duration is 2 hours. So It's a smaller system, they have more duration, so they have more energy within their system.
Okay, and my second question, maybe you can answer it, is have you had safety fire episodes in any of these?
Nothing in New York, no.
Nothing in New York State?
Right, and if you were to look at the track record of the bus industry, obviously people focus on, and I sympathize with you, and I understand. I'm part of a civics association where I live, and it's important to understand there's an inherent risk with battery storage. It's a nascent industry, so you have the right to ask a lot of questions, and I recognize that. Now, what's important to note is that people have been focusing a lot on the fires, but the track record for the bus industry has been relatively good, comparable to, for example, gas stations. You know that every year there's 5,000 gas stations that catch on fire in the US. So that's like 3% of the total number of gas stations that actually catch on fire in the US. So that's like a big number, right? Throughout, the numbers that we've collected, and Nick, maybe you can tell me, but there's been about maybe 10 or so fires that are considered big fires within the industry, and they use different technologies than what we use. They use NMC batteries. Those are nickel, manganese, cobalt, which is more energy dense, and because it's more energy dense, it's more volatile, right? When you're charging and discharging the system, that causes it to essentially at one point the temperatures fluctuate, and it caused a lot of fires. So our systems we use what we call LFP, which are lithium iron phosphate. They're, I would say, about 30-40% less dense, and their thermal runaway temperature is 100 degrees more, right? 100 degrees Fahrenheit more than the thermal runaway that you get from NMC batteries. So from the 10 fires that I mentioned, I would say 90% of those fires were NMC batteries. The cars that you see catching on fire, the Teslas, those are NMC batteries. We are using LFP batteries. So we think LFP batteries are safer, they're less energy dense. And then obviously what Nick was talking about earlier is that there are several layers of prevention and detection that goes before you get to a fire. And then you deal with the mitigation, which also has several layers of mitigation to deal with fire. So on the prevention end, for example, there are a lot of stringent codes. We have to comply with UL 9540, which is on the fire, and I don't know the specifics of the code, and Nick can talk more on the specifics of the code. We have to comply with the National Fire Protection Agency 855 code, which is also a stringent code for battery storage, and we also have to comply with the New York fire code. So that's kind of like on how you start thinking about the prevention mechanisms that go into how you design a system. Then from there you go into the detection, right? You have to be able to detect if there's something, if a failure is going to happen within your system. Our systems are monitored on a 24/7 basis. Every 2 seconds, there's a set of data for voltage, temperature, and current that is sent over to our remote centers that are reviewed if there are any variations in the temperature, if there's any variations in voltages and current. That will then, if we need to escalate that to a point where we think this is going to create a thermal runaway, meaning a fire, then the system is de-energized. If there isn't a quick reaction to that, then you get to the mitigation, which Nick was talking about earlier. So there are a lot of redundancies before you get to a fire. And again, comparable to something that is more volatile, gas stations, 5,000 fires a year. There's 150,000 gas stations in the US. I'm sure in this town alone, there's about 5-10 gas stations that you see around. I mean, gasoline is more volatile. I understand it's fundamentally different. I sympathize with the people. I understand that you're looking to get comfort around the fire. This is a nascent industry, but 5 years from now, people are not going to be talking about this.
Great, thank you very much. I think we need to get into the questions from the audience right now. So,
Can I submit Nick's resume for the record?
Great.
Because it's pretty impressive.
Right.
Thank you.
Marion Bowden?
Marion Bowden, Hampton Bays. I came in scared, and at this point I think I'm frankly terrified. I also apologize that my education, my degree is in psychology, which didn't exactly prepare me for the particulars being presented this evening. I'm lucky I know what a megawatt is at this point. I have a lot of disparate things to bring up, and then there are other people who'll come up, and so if I'm a little disjointed, please forgive me, okay?
Yep.
First of all, I don't know if this is important, but on all the paperwork the town has submitted on this, they said that it was on North Road and Law Board Road, and there is no Law Board Road. Apparently, it's a mistake. It's a Starboard, we think, but there is no Law Board Road. So, right.
That's the town record right there, just on the screen, just so you can see, it says 17 Lockport Road. If it's a mistake, we'll fix it.
So I don't know if this makes the whole thing null and void, wouldn't that be? One can only hope, but then again, my degree in psychology didn't prepare me for that. Another thing I'd like to just pass you, it's just a Xerox copy I made, but it's keen, I'm keenly aware of the fact that except for one brief moment, we never saw what was around that site. And I'd like to point it out, and you can pass it. This is Mishot Beach. This is the Shinnecock Canal. This is Shinnecock Bay. You're about a block from here and 2 blocks from there. And here's the site, the proposed site.
Yeah, there, we've pulled out.
Couldn't
Yeah.
be closer environmentally to a lot of water. I mean,
Yeah.
so you talked about spillover from water that you used to put out the fire and where it could go, which I thought was a great question, Christine. Think of where it will go, the canal.
Marion, you have to go to the mic, otherwise it won't pick you up.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Anyway, I don't know, where it would go right off the bat. That's kind of scary too. I also want to thank you for requesting, this is your board, and great questions. I loved your questions because I have anticipated it into my mind. But thanks for requesting that the proposed plan be paused. I think this is just way too an important and scary issue to feel like we're rushing through, like, what's the rush, kind of. In fact, I just read the other day that the Chinese are very far ahead in coming up with a sodium system.
I read that too. New battery.
Maybe we'll never need the lithium batteries. And the town board, I thought was interesting, they said they don't even know what questions to ask. I mean, we're faced with so much in doubt here, even trying to get a straight answer. Everything was an estimate and a guesstimate and a what have you. I've made a little note. I said, I forget where I wrote it, but I said, like, the current data only seems usable as kind of a guideline. Like, nobody seems to have been able to put it all together. And I wish I had a team. I do feel like David versus Goliath here tonight, but Jay Schneiderman, our town supervisor, said, and I quote, and this bothers me tremendously, I don't know all of the details, we've invited people based on our code to make application. And it bothers me that it seems like the town even invited this in and changed the code to make it doable. And if you know the area, it seems unconscionable to me that anybody could do that. When I built my house, it was on a lot of 10,313 square feet. I still remember that, which I thought was wonderful. Of course, then I hear it was about the previous applications, 48,000 square feet, and I go, wow. But if you know over near Mishot Beach, that whole side, on the north side of the proposed place, those were originally, a lot of them were summer cottages that have been done beautifully over the years, but they're still on teeny tiny lots. So we're talking about a lot of concentration of a lot of people. Like, they even said, well, there's one house on there and 4 cottages, like, nothing. But there was a lot of people around there. It's a densely populated area. Then, let's see. The town board amending the code to allow this, it bothers me, and I guess I should take that up with the town board, and hopefully I will. Another thing, I read an article by, it was an environmental something or other, and it said noise is a very significant concern. Now, I know the one on the west side of Hampton Bays that hasn't formally been submitted yet, they talked about a 12-foot wall around it. They're just talking about like a natural barrier. I don't know what the heck that means, especially with all the homes right around there. You know, fir trees, I mean, plum trees. I don't know what a natural barrier is. Southampton has avoidance areas of concern, for environmental reasons. And they say environmental, historical, cultural, or recreational. And I think considering the site with Mashut Beach, with the canal, with the marina right there, boats coming back and forth. I mean, it's fishing, people fishing. It certainly is environmental. Historical, I do believe it's also historical, based on when the British were here, especially on the east side, there were forts, so I think maybe on the west. Cultural and recreational, certainly it's recreational. Was mentioned that there would be a curb cut access to the site. And that kind of bothered me too, because curb cut access, if we're going to be needing, God forbid, fire vehicles, emergency vehicles from all over, I'm even wondering how adequate the access site would be. Okay, I also wrote on the back here, being a little snarky, nothing will go wrong until it does. How often have we heard that? Oh, we never anticipated that this would happen. Okay, and I'm almost finished, and then my team.
Yes, we have several people.
My
who
team
want
will
to
be up
speak.
shortly.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. One thing, I'm pleased that the proposed plan pause came from your board, and the town board even says, one minute they say, they think it's okay, and the next minute they say, quote, they're even unsure of what questions to ask. How safe can we feel when the town board doesn't even know what questions to ask? And Christine, you said, you were quoted in an article saying how you want to facilitate good projects, and yet at the same time support innovative projects, which we understand, but this seems like a little bit dicey, but I thank you at least, that you recognize that. And then I think this is
That's it,
last,
Marion?
but not
You got it?
least. When Jay Schneiderman said, when a moratorium is considered, I just get concerned because we've invited people based on our code to make the application. They probably have expended a lot of time and money trying to come up with a proposal that met our code. Do we owe developers this because they put in a lot of time and money, or are our people and our right to a safe and worry-free time in Hampton Bays, are we, allowed to be the victims or the potential victims? Someone else, I think, who knows more about technical stuff will speak on that, okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Marion.
Thank you.
Gerald Anthony is next.
I'm going to pass.
You're going to pass to Barbara Lefkowitz?
I'll pass
And how about Dolores Riley?
Hi.
Hi.
I don't have anything terribly exciting, and I'm ashamed to say that I left my notebook and my water bottle at home.
Oh.
So forgive the disjointed thing. I want to start by asking one question. Is there a book, because Marion, I feel the way that you do, is there a book that I could go and buy or take out of the library that would bring me up to date on this whole thing, which I hadn't heard about Bess until a few months ago? Is there a book, and can you see me later, and I'll pass it on to other people? The other thing, I did write myself a couple of notes on my phone, which I then proceeded to leave in my chair. I've heard things about, which is one of the things I'm confused about, runaway fires, and well, this is a lithium, thank you, this is a lithium battery, and this is this, and this is that, and okay, Montauk is, when you said Montauk is 5 megawatts, I really took a lot of comfort from the fact that Montauk and East Hampton and whatever the other town was, Hempstead, had these systems. And I was like, that's really great. So we're not the guinea pigs. But 5 megawatts is very different from 100. And then you said, I wanted to know who monitors, is there someone from your company in an office and they have visuals of the distress board or something saying, oh my God, there's a small fire in Hampton Bays, let's call the fire department? I assume that that's true? Okay, that's good. And I guess that's really it.
Great.
I guess that's it.
Okay.
And thank you for listening. And
Thank you,
can tell
Dolores.
me a book, and I will share it with everybody I know.
Share it with everyone.
Everybody in the world.
Doug Feinberg?
Good evening, I'm Doug Feinberg from Hampton Bays, and
I'm Bridget Marr from Hampton Bays also.
Bridget Marr?
Yeah.
okay.
And we're neighbors.
We're neighbors. I'm a little south of the facility, proposed facility, and Bridget is north of the
I'm
facility.
near Mashut Beach.
What's
So
your
it
address?
is not a remote area, it is a populated area.
It's a very popular.
What is your address?
My address is 3 Cedar Point Road.
Thank you.
And some other neighbors of mine and I did a canvass of the neighborhood last weekend, and the general consensus, we got over 100 signatures on here in opposition, not necessarily to the idea of the BES, but to the, particularly to the location, and particularly to actually have the time spent, put a moratorium on it, until we really understand what this is all about. There's a lot of generals, there's a lot of vagueness, and again, we are a very populated area. We're on top of the aquifer, the water aquifer for drinking water. We're one block, the facility would be one block east of the Shinnecock Canal, 2 blocks south of Mashut Beach or Great Peconic Bay, and then within a third of a mile of Shinnecock Bay. And if anything happened, it would be an environmental catastrophe, not just for the immediate neighbors, but for the whole area. I mean, our waterways are so sensitive, it's just unbelievable. So that's one, the environmental issue, and then there's the sound pollution issue as well. You know, we don't know how much, you can talk to me about decibels, they can talk to me about decibels. You have to equate it to a jet engine, you have to equate it to something that, again, you're gonna go sit out on your back deck with your friends and have a humming sound like a jet engine's ready to take off. Because these things obviously have to have some sort of coolant that's going on a constant basis. From what I understand, they have to maintain a temperature of 500 Celsius, and I don't know what that equates to in Fahrenheit. But obviously, there's a coolant issue going on there.
Well, we'll have one of the engineers respond to that, so, because that's a good question. Okay?
And, okay, Shinnecock Canal, and then if there is a catastrophic meltdown of this thing, you have 2 arteries coming, 3 arteries coming in and out, west and east of the area. You have Sunrise Highway, which it's 90 feet away from. You have the railroad tracks, which it's probably about 90 feet, the railroad tracks are probably about 90 feet south of the facility, the proposed facility. And then you have Montauk Highway not far away from that. And if any of those, if one of them gets bogged up, or any 2 of them, or 3 of them, how does anybody move east or west? I mean, it's catastrophic. I'm sorry.
Additionally, on top of that, if there was a major catastrophe, let's just say worst case scenario, do we have to evacuate? We're living there. Are we going to be inhaled? What are we going to be doing? I mean, how do we get out? We don't know. And there's a lot of people living there. I mean, and they were all very, very concerned about that. And I know the safety is being addressed, and you've really covered that. But there's so much theoretical going on here. If you Google this stuff, there's a ton of stuff that comes up, and fire and how to manage it is one of the biggest concerns.
Right.
And I'm sorry, I just
No,
Yeah.
please, no. So,
fire for a minute.
so, we're not, again,
We're not against it.
We're not opposed to it, we're opposed to the location, and that we feel that these sort of facilities would be better in a remote location, quite possibly the Hampton Bays Transfer Station, Grobeski Airport, industrial areas, rather than, heavily dense, commercial and residential mix, which is where One North is, as well as where the facility off of North Road is being considered also. Because it's mixed also over there as well. I mean, there's, you know, you have the Hampton Maid, you have a lot of little businesses around there. So, and again, I think we need, or I think that the town needs a considerable amount more time to gather information
Right.
before really making decisions.
Can I just say one thing? I'd like to say that if you really ask, everybody in this room, you guys included, and Gus, I think you sympathize with us, if that's your name, you wouldn't want this close to your home. This would be, really, I think it's right under Sunrise Highway, right under 27, that those little houses and cottages. So it's about 2/10 of a mile from where I live. So imagine yourself in my shoes and in Doug's shoes and in people in this room who live right there. We're scared of this, and I think rightfully so. Last thing is nuclear power. I'm not comparing, but they're energies, and they're good energies, but things go wrong. Radiation leakage, Chernobyl, I mean, come on, that's a bad case, but, you know, things happen, so we have to be careful.
Okay, submit your comments to us, but I just want, will you respond to that coolant question? He had a question about the internal temperature going up to 500 degrees.
And noise.
You shook your head. Who can respond to that? Here, do you want to listen to this?
So apologies, Gus, if I'm jumping in, but these systems are liquid-cooled systems.
They're liquid-cooled.
Liquid-cooled, they use a ethylene glycol mix, similar to something that you'd find in your automobile with water. Their operating temperatures are pretty much maximize that room temperature. They're not high-temperature sodium batteries, but I do, first of all, now that I'm here, I do really appreciate all the concerns from the residents, the concerns from the board. I just want to set the record straight, you know, where everyone is now. I was there when I was working at the fire department, and this technology came and landed on my desk in New York City. And I do want to state, apologies if I went off and I made the impression that something is 100% safe. From an engineering point of view, nothing is ultimately, anything that holds energy is never going to be 100% safe. This technology has maximized the safety requirements and has minimized the risks with a lot of the testing and the listing requirements for that. So I appreciate that. Apologies if I came off trying to make that presumptuous assumption, but I wanted to set.
Did you give us a temperature or not?
Yes, it's about 73 operating degrees temperature.
73. So it's
Room
not
temperature.
500?
No. Room
Okay.
temperature.
All right, so that just clarifies that. We're all learning together.
If I may follow up, one more question again that she raises, and again, just what's the noise level at operating temperature at the property boundary, for example, and how does that compare to a lawnmower, for example, for comparative purposes?
Hi, my name is Kevin Marr. I'm with the firm AKRF. We've prepared the SECRA environmental documentation as well as the noise analysis for the project, and the project will comply with the noise code. Not my phone.
Ice cream.
The project will comply with the noise code at the property line. Our noise analysis indicated that it will be 55 dBA, which is compliant with the city requirement. And 55 dBA, looking at our, I'm a planner by background. I'm not a noise acoustic expert, but our noise acoustic technician is indicated in our noise report, which was reviewed as part of the SECRA analysis, that at 55 dBA, essentially light car traffic at about 50 feet. So that's about what the equivalent. Sorry, I don't have the number for a lawnmower, but
No, I understand that, but I see even when you said 55, I saw that Marion couldn't quite comprehend what that meant in terms of noise level. So equating it to light traffic is a good indication.
Feet, correct.
Yes, thank you.
And this is at the boundary of our site.
Yes.
Correct.
And can I ask a
Yeah.
I just wanted to let there was someone else who does want to speak.
Right, we have a question.
Following up, do these units, I know the possibility they catch fire, do they explode? And also in terms of, again, emissions, and I think George alluded to this, and a house fire, for example, if they burn, first off, do they explode? I know they could possibly burn. If they burn, compare it to a house fire. in terms of what's going into the atmosphere?
So, when these systems go into thermal runaway, which is the typical failure mode, they do generate flammable off-gassing. But the system is designed to mitigate that with what we call an explosion mitigation system. So if that flammable environment were in a very worst case scenario to develop within that container, if it's found an ignition source, it could create overpressures and potentially, explode. These systems are designed with a sort of a deflagration vent that is going to alleviate at much, much, much lower temperatures, lower pressures than something that would be catastrophic. So it would pop open, alleviate those pressures. It wouldn't create hazardous pressure waves. It wouldn't create shrapnel. That's ultimately what they call the fire protection approach, the explosion mitigation approach. So these systems have the potential to create flammable off-gassing during thermal runaway. You've seen the videos with e-bikes going on fire, and it's a very volatile effect. Ultimately, going back to the multiple layers of safety, in a really worst-case scenario, if that were to develop within the cabinet, it's designed to safely release that pressure so it doesn't have that really hazardous effect.
And your second question was?
Well, it was with regard to a house, comparing it to a house fire.
Yes.
With billows of smoke and,
Yeah.
are these things, again, contained, or can you expect a lot of?
Right. Information from the industry shows that the release from these systems there's nothing exotic there that's anything different from your normal house fire. The systems are designed to contain to an individual unit, so it's not the expectation that this entire failure would propagate throughout all of the other systems. It's going to be isolated to that event, and that off-gassing will go up and it'll typically disperse and dissipate within the atmosphere. Because there will be first responders there in probably closer proximity along the fence line, which is what we typically require, staying outside of the fence, and what we recommend to first responders, we still want them to be safe and don full PPE, because even in a regular house fire, there could be a tremendous amount of things that you don't want to be breathing in, like carbon monoxide, which is a typical signature for anything that's undergoing combustion and incomplete combustion. So similar to a house fire, similar to ESS, carbon monoxide might be present for first responders that are in the vicinity. Full PPE is always a recommendation.
Can I ask you a question about the codes? Have the New York State Fire Prevention Codes been evolved so where they address the best systems, and have they been adopted?
Yes. So I think the New York State and their 2020 Uniform Fire Prevention Code, when that was being adopted, and I have to give kudos also to our principal founder, Paul, who's in the room. There was a newer edition of that code that was being developed for the international community, the 2021 International Fire Code. And the 2021 International Fire Code, much like that NFPA 855 standard that Gus had mentioned, that these systems have to comply to, this is considered the gold standard. All of these belts and suspenders, all of these safety systems are incorporated in these very new standards. That's actually one of the documents that I wanted to circulate, which is sort of like a really in-depth detail on these systems and the protections that are required. New York State actually went above and beyond in 2020. The 2021 International Fire Code was not officially out. It was not officially promulgated at that point. New York State went above and beyond and adopted those safety requirements for battery energy storage systems. So I do have to give kudos to New York State. I'm a little bit biased. I think New York Cities are a little bit more stringent, but that's just because of the nature of those installations. But New York State is right there, right behind them with a really robust set of requirements for safety for energy storage systems.
Okay, thank you. We had someone else wanted to speak?
Gentleman here.
Ray.
Yeah?
Right.
Ray D'Angelo.
Madam Chairman, before that gentleman speaks, Paul Rogers, who is the founder of this company that Nick works with, wanted to add something to Nick's response to the questions that were raised. Can we just divert a little bit?
Yep.
No.
It's my turn. You have to wait his turn.
Oh, all right, well,
Ray D'Angelo, Hampton Bays.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Ray D'Angelo.
Ray D'Angelo, Raymond D'Angelo, D''Angelo. In Italian means of the angels.
And mine means the lighthouse.
Excuse me?
Lo Faro means the lighthouse.
Okay, well, I'm the
So
president
there
of the
we are.
Italian American Association. I have an application, I want to give it to you.
Okay.
All right?
Good.
All right. First of all, last year, I'm going to use the statistics from New York City. But last year, there were, in 2022, there were 200 lithium related fires in New York City with 5 deaths. So far this year, there's been 60 with 5 deaths. Between 2017 and October 2019, there were 28 fires in best facilities in South Korea. Okay, so that's a lot of fires, and you can see from this, they're pretty intense. Okay, I want to take exception. I'm retired from the New York City Fire Department. And believe me, there's a big difference between a house fire and these best things these best units give off if there's a fire. I'll give you some context about long durations. In Indian Island, there was a fire in a shed where they had all these golf carts, which were electrically supplied with lithium batteries. The volunteers were there, because the water situation was not good there, so I will give them that. But they were there, I think, 2 days, over 50,000 gallons of water. They had to supply it with tank trucks. This was an extended operation, very, very difficult for the fire service because we have volunteers. These guys are wonderful. I mean, I got paid for this. It affected my health severely. These guys have families, they have regular jobs. We have to take that in consideration when you put these, when we're going to locate these units. Now, one of the problems I'm very concerned about this area is that under New York State Sanitary Code for water systems, there's a minimum requirement for firefighting purposes. Hampton Bays Water District never fulfills that, never gets close to it. And this area is notorious for low water pressure. So when there's a catastrophic failure, and like I said, there was 28 of these fires, and there will be a catastrophic failure someplace along the line, they need copious amounts of water. Where are they going to get this water if there's not enough supply there? I'm very concerned about it. And again, I'm sympathetic to these people. Who the heck wants to live near this thing if this thing goes? I wrote about it 2 years ago to the paper, and they published it. I had a piece. I thought the thing should be in an industrial area or at the airport. But they wanted to have it over here because it's more convenient because they have the substations. But I mean, we can't. We have to always put life threat above convenience. And does anybody here want to live next to this thing? This thing should be in an industrial area. And if it's cost more money to do it, that they have to build another substation, let that be then let's do that. Again, I realize none of you have the expertise with this, and I understand that the quandary that you're in, but this thing really should be given a 1-year moratorium until we know more about it. Like I just read, they send me this stuff from the fire department. They have CO2 systems, which they flood these areas with carbon dioxide. And now they're finding that it's not a good solution because the carbon dioxide, because the fires are so hot, breaks down and it actually deoxygenate the fire. So they increase the intensity of the fire. By the way, that 500 degrees Celsius is the ignition point for lithium. That's where that comes in from. Okay? At 500 degrees Celsius, which is really, really pretty high, that's how intense these things get. And with that thermal runaway, can I explain that, is one battery disintegrates, it generates so much heat, it ignites another battery, and then we get a thermal runaway where the whole facility starts going. And these systems, one of the problems with this is all these batteries are made of lithium salts. Like, for example, lithium cobalt oxide. When they disintegrate, when they start to degenerate, they oxygenate the fire, they generate oxygen. So that's what happens. Like, you know, the fire, you think you got it under control, and then more oxygen is generated, and the fire lights up again. So that's why there's such long duration. I think recently we had that car fire over here in Southold, and we had, at the Civic Association, we had the Chief Fire Marshal, John Rankin, and I had a conversation with him. He told me they had to put 30,000 gallons of water on that fire to extinguish it. It actually melted the asphalt underneath the facilities. 4 people died in that accident. So these are very serious, we're dealing with a very serious thing here. And I'm not a climate change denier. I just think that we have to err on the side of safety. Not only for the people that live there, but these firefighters. You know, we don't know what the heck we're dealing with here. This is a new technology, and we're learning as we go along. And I don't want the citizens and the residents of Hampton Bays to be guinea pigs. And I don't think you guys want it either. So, I mean, we got all these guys here, it's just one against all these guys, but believe me, I have some experience in this. So, blank happens, stuff happens. And I'd be at these things and then people would be saying, oh my God, how did this happen? Things happen.
Yep.
And when they happen, like Murphy's Law, they happen at the worst possible time. So there's the potential here for catastrophic failure is not to be overlooked. This thing might be okay for 5 years, and then one night we really would have it. So I really would like you to put this,
Yes.
I think you should ask for a one-year moratorium, because if we do have a fire at one of these facilities, and I asked John Rankin, he said none of these companies around here are really up to the task yet. It's gonna have to be a multi-unit operation. And we need to train together. They have to have the incident commanders be prepared for a long duration operation. They might need tanker trucks. I mean, this needs a lot of training. It's gonna take time to be prepared for this.
Right.
And I don't wanna go ahead, have the thing, and then start worrying about it. And again, I don't think it's the right location. There's a water supply problem there. The thing should be, I think, at the airport or some other isolated area.
So just so you know, this board requested a moratorium of the town board.
Well,
It was our
you posted
vote.
at 6 months, I think it should even be a year, but thank you for
Whatever,
6
but
months.
we sent a request.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. D'Angelo. Yes, please.
Good evening, everyone. Paul Rogers. I am one of the co-founders of ESRG. I'm retired from the New York City Fire Department, where I did 25 years. Most of my time was in hazardous material, so I have a hazardous material background. I was pulled offline in order to work on this in New York City when this was first coming into New York City, again with Nick Petrakis. I was on the other side of the table like you are, and I understand their concerns. I had those same concerns because I was on that side. And this is why we put together the large-scale fire testing. Large-scale fire testing, 9540A, UL 9540A. I sit on that committee. I sit on the National Codes Committee for this. You mentioned something about the state code. I worked with the Department of State to make sure that we had the safest code around. I worked with them to make sure that the firefighters were kept safe. There's nothing more important to me is the safety of the firefighter. Of course, if the firefighters are kept safe, we can keep the community safe. I've lost a lot of friends, so it was imperative to me to make sure that we had a code in there that was going to reflect safety of the fire service. And that's exactly what the Department of State did. They listened to what I had to say, and they adopted the code early to make sure that that was there. I sit on these national codes representing the fire service. I fight tooth and nail to get everything that we can for the fire service. Let's go back to UL 9548. When this came in, we said, prove your safety. Prove to us that these things are safe to go into New York City when we were working on this in New York City. They didn't know how to do it. We didn't know what to tell them to do. We wound up getting Underwriters Laboratory to come in and their engineers. And they started to put together a testing plan to prove safety. That testing plan was to try to mimic or evaluate what they consider a reasonable worst-case scenario. You have to go with reasonable, not an unreasonable. You build a house, unreasonable to actually protect the house against someone throwing gasoline on the house. That's an unreasonable event. Can it go on fire? Absolutely. So what you need to do is do a reasonable worst-case scenario. And that's what 9540A actually represents, a reasonable worst-case scenario. And the reason that Nick couldn't come up with a direct question for you, because a lot of these tests that are performed by these companies that are putting these systems together, they're actually doing a good job. When this test first came out and we asked for it on the national code, they were very upset about it. It's millions of dollars that they had to go back and redesign the systems to make sure that they would not have these fires spread throughout the containers themselves. And that's exactly what 9540A does. It says, limit your fire spread if it does go on fire. They've actually done such a great job on putting in fast resistance when they put these things to the test, that these things, not all of them, but there are certain systems that won't even go on fire. They'll fail, but they won't even go on fire. So what they do is sometimes people want to know, well, will they go on fire? They actually go above and beyond what the standard says. And one particular company had to put 48 cells simultaneously into thermal runaway event, failing 48 cells all at the same time to make sure that they could actually get a fire. And when they did, only half the container went on fire. The whole other half didn't. That was above and beyond what the prescribed code called for and above and beyond what the UL standard called for. So again, that UL 9540A that we continue to, it's very technical. Again, I sit on that particular code or that standard to make sure that we represent fire service and make sure that these fires, if they were to occur, because I'll never say nothing will ever occur. That would be irresponsible. What we do is try to reduce the risk of these things ever happening. And that's what we're looking at. And when I was in the New York City Fire Department, I was the one going around to all the staff chiefs, all the division conferences, and explaining to the chiefs how we're going to manage these fires. I was out here speaking to the fire service in Amagansett only a couple of months ago, where I believe the Southampton Fire Department showed up. We did a generalization, not site-specific, a generalization on how to manage these particular fires if they were to go on fires. We get a little bit into 9540A. They don't really care too much about the 9540A. They just want to know, what do I need to do when I get there? That's their concern, right? This stuff that I'm talking about is very, very technical, and it needs a longer discussion than what we have here. But I can assure you that we'd be able to get into that deep dive, not at the expense of everyone's here, but if you wanted to have a sidebar, and spend time with the committee or the planning board here, we would be more than happy to come back and actually explain how these things are tested and the robustness that's involved with the actual testing and the listings that each one of these systems get.
Great, thank you. I was going to ask you for a copy of the 9540A, but I don't know that we could understand it.
Yeah.
So isolated from the regular New York State code, maybe you can submit it. Anthony, we can follow through on that.
And the reason that I asked for that 2021 code, they were going to adopt the 2018 International Fire Code and modify it, but that did not have the 9540A testing in there. So I spoke with the people up in the Department of State that adopts the state fire code for the state, and I said, you need to adopt this code early. And that's exactly what they did, and they were the first ones in the country to do it, and I'm proud to say that they took that leap and they trusted, and that's what they did.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to leave this here. Yes?
Can I speak? I came in late, so I couldn't.
Of course, come and just give me your name.
Elizabeth Huck. Elizabeth Huck.
And your name is?
My name's Elizabeth Hook. I live in Hampton Bays.
H-O-O-K? Hook?
H-O-O-K. Okay, when you're looking for that, let me speak. So, I commend the company for all of the efforts that they have made, and I think the SECRA review they did was good. The one thing that I would say about the SECRA review is I don't really understand how you could issue a negative declaration, meaning that there is no significant environmental impact, when we're talking about runaway fires like this, and we're talking about something that, I spent 5 minutes on Google and I came up with 3 very scary articles.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them, February 2023, that says, an exploding problem, fires sparked by lithium batteries are confounding firefighters. I think this is a significant environmental impact. And considering the fact that the planning board hasn't received the education and the training to deal with these questions, I question whether or not that negative declaration is really valid.
And I would request that that be withdrawn based on getting further information before you can decide that there is no significant environmental impact. You know, I think that all of the efforts they've made are terrific efforts. It cannot be in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And, you know, part of what you are saddled with is what Marion pointed out, and that is the town board, you know, put in zoning that these can be put anywhere. And they shouldn't be put anywhere. Our lives, our properties should not be experimentally exposed to a BESS facility. If we're going to have a BESS facility, why not the first one be in an area like an industrial area where if there is a failure, nobody is losing their property. We don't have recreational facilities at stake. I think it's a little bit, I think what the planning person said was we didn't want to make it too narrow so that we're excluding anybody. But putting a BESS facility in a residential neighborhood is making it far too broad. And I just don't think that there is enough information to the planning board, to the town board, to agree to put this facility in there. All of the fire suppression efforts they've made are great, but when I looked at the secret documents, there's nothing final. There's not a program. There's a lot of aspirational information. Our fire marshal told us that he has no training. They don't know how to put these out. Basically, with the car, they just had to dip it into water, essentially. That's the only way to put it out. How can you approve a facility if we don't even have our emergency responders educated and knowledgeable about how to put it out if it happens?
Yep.
And I think that 6 months is a short time for a moratorium. I think it needs a year, because as Ray pointed out, it's going to take a multidisciplinary approach, entity, you know, town approach. There's a lot of pieces that have to be put in. And then Ray suggested that I read the letter that I wrote to the town board regarding the BESS facility. The town board seems to have taken, I'm going to skip the beginning part. The town board seems to have taken action to implement the code provisions without any real consideration of the significant hazard posed to neighbors of BESS facilities, and without having consulted with any of the emergency response agencies as to their knowledge and ability to respond to emergency situations. And we heard from the Hampton Bays Fire Marshal that they're not equipped right now to respond. Both these proposed facilities are slated for residential locations in which significant harm to persons and property are a real threat. And I think Ray covered the, you know, self-igniting nature of it. Again, the availability of an adequate water supply. We are asked right now to alternate our sprinklers. Where are we going to get all the water to put something out if it comes? And then all of the planning. None of the above was considered when the town board amended the code to allow these facilities to be built in Southampton. The Hampton Bays Fire Marshal conceded at the most recent meeting of the HBCA that there is no plan in place to address these potential runaway fires, and that there has been no training of any kind or education provided. How can the town board and the planning board allow two such facilities to be built in residential locations in Hampton Bays when there is no notion of the danger, much less how to mitigate it on the part of anyone in town government? And again, I think that they've done a wonderful job for their plant, but the town board is responsible for our safety, and they should know what they're doing before they amend the code. Again, I talked about this significant environmental impact.
You could submit your letter to us, Elizabeth, okay?
I will leave
Do you
a
have that
letter,
copy?
and I will also leave copies of the 3 articles that I
Okay.
found in 5 minutes.
Great.
But I would like the planning board to really think very carefully about the concerns of the people who are living close by. I'm not as close as they are, and it concerns me. Because
Okay.
the other thing that we haven't mentioned is that some of the fumes. The fumes have toxic properties. And do we want those toxic fumes also? No, you know, we haven't really talked about the danger of the toxicity of the
Right.
fumes of the fire. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like Paul Rogers to respond to some of the comments.
Yes, very briefly, though, because we're going to leave the hearing open, and
Well, that's fine. We're fine with that.
Good.
I'd like to speak to Tim, if I may.
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, just, she brings up a great point about the problems that we have with the lithium-ion batteries inside of consumer products. I sit on the United States Department of Transportation, FAA Lithium Battery Safety Committee, and we knew back in 2018, with the high demand of lithium-ion batteries that were coming into the United States, that we were getting counterfeit batteries that were making their way into consumer products, and this is what we're seeing the result of that right now. What we have going into these energy storage systems cannot use those cells. They have to be listed cells. They have to go performance requirements. They are not allowed to do that, otherwise the national recognized testing laboratory cannot give them a listing. I just want to make sure that we distinguish the two different industries. This is the only industry using this application of lithium-ion batteries that has large-scale fire testing. The car industry doesn't have it. The consumer products doesn't have it. But the energy storage system requires this large-scale fire testing to validate and prove that safety.
Thank you. Your name, please?
Tom Nimmo, and I promise I'll be very brief.
NIMO?
NIMMO.
MO.
I live at 14 Lawrence Avenue, which is diagonally across from the proposed location. And back in October, I came home one day to find someone fired a bullet through my living room window. And I'm literally right across the street from the proposed location. If that bullet had gone the other way, it would have gone right through, you know, possibly their facility if there was one there. But I think enough has been said about the safety concerns. I'd like to speak more to the noise that would be generated and the quality of life. Right at that location is a crossroads of North Road and Sunrise Highway. There's an overpass right there. And on any given day, you have empty tractor trailers coming back from Southampton, bouncing across that bridge. The sound echoes. You've got cars passing underneath that like to honk their horns because it amplifies the sound. There is a nightclub right around the corner, and on Saturday nights you can feel the thumping coming up through the ground. As everyone has mentioned, this is a very densely populated area. It's not a remote location, and I think anything that will contribute to increasing the noise in this neighborhood should be immediately eliminated. I don't think you should even consider it. I'm all for green energy. I'm all for what they want to do. I'm just completely against to where they want to do it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, if you have anything more to say, we're going to close, we're not going to close the. Oh, is anyone on Zoom? Ken would have said.
No one on Zoom.
Right. We're going to leave the hearing open. There'll probably be many more questions. We'll have more questions. We will take a copy of that 940 whatever A document.
Well, when do you keep you open until? I need to know.
An adjournment date.
30 days?
30 days at least.
So it's going to be May 25th meeting.
Well, the next one. June,
June
the June 3rd meeting.
You didn't want to close the hearing, just leave the record open for...
We're leaving it open, and please send your letters, send whatever reports you have to us.
Is the hearing being closed, though, but the record...
No,
No,
the hearing
adjourning
is,
the
I'm
hearing.
adjourning
Okay.
the hearing until
Okay.
June 3rd.
June 3rd?
June 3rd?
Is it the 3rd?
No, June 8th.
I thought it was
June
the
8th.
8th. It's
June
8th.
8th.
So I just want to ask you one question, I mean, for my own satisfaction. LIPA's substations very much drive your location, right? Because you've got to hook into a substation. Have you ever requested of LIPA, because we've been ignored for many, many years here, why they have not installed substations in areas like industrial areas or outside of where they are? Has there had any dialogue on the part of your companies?
We have discussed the viability.
So you have to come up to the
Microphone.
podium.
We have discussed the viability of our location to tap into that substation, and that was something that was receptive. LIPA was responsive, and we have to go through a series of studies with LIPA, which takes about 3 years, that we started almost,
Right. No,
a year and a half ago. And so the most recent set of studies have said that they are okay with us having the
Yeah.
facility at that location.
Okay.
But nothing specific to your point, why
No, my
they-
point is that
I understand your
there should be
question.
substations.
That's a question of
Outside
land
of-
availability and
Right.
easements, and that's a difficult.
Just wanted to get it on the record. Thank you.
Can I say something before?
Please.
So this is not pertaining to this application, but pertaining to this meeting in particular. I just want to thank everybody for showing up
Yeah.
and asking questions, very professional, very respectful way from both sides. This is, in my opinion, I think my board members would agree with me. This is the way a meeting is supposed to be. This is the way a public hearing is supposed to go, a two-way dialogue. So I just want to thank you. This is the reason why I'm here, because I think we do the best work when we have information in a very respectful manner like this. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well said, Craig.
I would just like to add that I think we are all getting information, some of which scares us, and we're mixing bananas and pears with different kinds of batteries, and lithium batteries being used in a best facility versus a bike that maybe was plugged in and left too long. And so I'm trying to learn, when I get information, more than just this happened, but exactly what it was or what it is. Because maybe some of the stuff we're reading that's scaring us doesn't even apply here. So I'm going to try to be careful when I look at stuff to make sure that I know what I'm looking at.
Okay, thank you very much for coming, really appreciate it, and thank your
Thank you.
team.
Thank you.
And motion to adjourn?
Motion.
By George, second by Tom, all in favor.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, 5 in favor, 2 absent.
Where is the massage next?